Dubbed as the unsinkable ship, the Titanic was finally rediscovered in 1985 after being out of the grid for 73 years. This led to insatiable numbers of underwater voyages and expeditions. Throughout the years, over 5,500 artifacts were discovered from the remains of the sunken ship. And today, we'll be discovering 10 of those artifacts. But before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, click the notification bell, and subscribe to our channel. Now, let's get into this list and start with Titanic item number 10. The Titanic Bell from the Titanic's crow's nest. RMS Titanic Incorporated retrieved it from the debris field surrounding the 1987 Titanic wreck. Frederick Fleet, one of the crow's nest lookouts, rung this bell 3 times and quickly called the bridge, stating his fateful words, "Iceberg ahead," to 6th Officer James Moody. Unfortunately, it was already too late. The Titanic then collided with the iceberg. This historic bell is presently on exhibit in Titanic the Artifact Exhibition, an outstanding collection of Titanic antiquities that can be seen in numerous places around North America. Titanic Key. At number 9, the Key, which was discovered in the remains of Sidney Centenary, a 25-year-old Englishman who worked as a third-class attendant on the Titanic. When additional life jackets was needed, Sidney bravely entered Titanic's F deck, which has been submerged with extremely cold water, and used this same key to unlock a locker containing several of the life jackets. Without a doubt, the self-sacrificing act of collecting the life jackets saved many lives. Sidney's body was rescued from the wreckage and buried at sea, but his pocket watch and key were delivered to his pregnant wife, Madge. This next item is this wedding ring that belongs to Ellen Gerda Lindell, a Swedish third-class traveler traveling to the United States with her spouse, Edvard. Ellen and Edvard both attempted so hard to make their way into a partially immersed lifeboat as the Titanic sank, but Ellen fell into the sea, and Edvard didn't have the power to lift her into the lifeboat. Edvard managed to catch Ellen's wedding ring as she slid from his grasp, and then witnessed in despair as Ellen floated away and perished. Edvard died quickly from the cold, and his body was eventually discovered holding his wife's wedding ring at the bottom of the lifeboat. Essential oils. At number 7 are these vials containing essential oils that were never delivered. Adolf Saalfeld, the German head of a chemists and distillers company, was shipping these vials of essential oils to New York in the intention of distributing products there and developing his business to the United States. Although Adolf managed to get off the sinking of the Titanic on a lifeboat, these essential oils were not so fortunate. These vials were discovered and recovered during a Titanic expedition in 2000. David Pybus, a perfume historian, effectively reproduced a few of the fragrances using their original chemical composition. Chef Hat. At number 6, we discover the chef hat of 3rd Baker William Edward Hine, a 36-year-old Englishman who previously served in the kitchen on board the Olympic, the sister ship of the Titanic. William and his brother-in-law perished on the Titanic, and their corpses were never discovered. Since William was unwed, his death was announced to his sister, Emily, and father, Henry. Years later, William Hine's chef hat was retrieved from the wreckage of the Titanic, and because his whole name had been sewn on the brim, it became easy to determine whose hat it was. Brownie Camera. At number 5, we have a unique Kodak Brownie camera belonging to a 17-year-old Canadian girl, Bernice Palmer. She was on board the Carpathia, the vessel that rescued the Titanic survivors, and took a photograph of what is thought to be the iceberg that wrecked the Titanic. She also photographed the Titanic refugees aboard the Carpathia and recounted how they were hauled into the ship, saying, "Their faces looked frozen and terrified." She added that many of the women were dressed in the oversized coats worn by the men who died on the Titanic. An unidentified newsman observed Bernice taking the shots and gave her $10 for ownership rights to the photographs she had taken. This is the agreement that Bernice signed quickly, not appreciating the tremendous value of her photographs. In 1986, Bernice handed over her camera and images to the Smithsonian Institution. life jacket. And at number 4, this is Madeline Astor. John Jacob Astor IV's wife wore this life jacket. When the Titanic sank, Madeline was 18 years old and 5 months pregnant, and John was 47. Madeline would have received preferential treatment because she was a first-class passenger and the wife of the Titanic's richest passenger. She did, however, board one of the Titanic's last lifeboats. When the Carpathia retrieved her lifeboat, Madeline's life jacket was taken off and delivered to the office of Gottlieb Rencher, the Carpathia senior attendant in charge. Rencher preserved the life jacket and exhibited it in his New York office for many years. On August 14, 1912, Madeline gave birth to an adorable boy and named him John Jacob Astor VI. Wallace Hartley Violin. Wallace Hartley's violin comes in at number 3. Wallace, a 33-year-old Englishman, was the Titanic's violinist and bandleader. His violin was a gift from Wallace's fiancée, Maria Robinson, in 1910, and is engraved with the following: "For Wallace, on the occasion of our engagement, from Maria." As the Titanic sank, light-hearted tunes arose from this violin and the other instruments in the Titanic's band. Wallace's body was discovered 10 days following the sinking and with his violin strapped around him. The violin was most likely seized by one of the guys collecting bodies and remained unknown to the general public until 2006, after it was recovered in an English attic. Forensic scientists examined the violin carefully and determined that it was, in fact, the identical instrument that Wallace Hartley used. In 2013, the violin was auctioned off for $1.7 million. Alexander Oscar Halverson Letter. At number 2, we have the sole remaining known note written by a Titanic victim. It was written on April 13, 1912, by New York businessman Alexander Oscar Halverson, only one day before the Titanic hit the iceberg. Halverson wrote the letter to his mother about his adventures on the cruise. He mentions the band, the food, and other passengers, namely John Jacob Astor IV, the world's richest man at the time. He noted, "Despite having millions of dollars, he looks like any other human being. They sit out on deck with the rest of us." The letter concludes, "If all goes well, we are expected to arrive in New York Wednesday a.m." Sadly, Halverson did not survive, and his body was eventually discovered alongside this letter. First class menu. Finally, at number 1, this is the Titanic's final first-class lunch menu. Take note of the year, April 14, 1912, the exact day the Titanic collided with the iceberg. When Abraham Lincoln Solomon, an American first-class passenger, boarded lifeboat number 1, he carried the menu with him. As you notice, the menu is fairly expensive, with several appetizers and meals that I won't even attempt to pronounce. What other treasures do you think can be discovered in the Titanic? Dive down into the comment box and tell us what you're expecting to see. See you in our next videos as we continue to explore the sunken world of the unsinkable ship Titanic.